The house at the end of Ashford Lane looked like something pulled from a real estate brochure. White shutters, a freshly painted porch, trimmed hedges. It was the kind of place neighbors admired when they passed on their evening walks. And at the center of that picture-perfect frame stood Daniel Hale. Everyone knew his name. He was the man who always offered to shovel snow in winter, who hosted polite barbecues in summer, who shook hands firmly and smiled warmly. On the surface, Daniel was the kind of husband every woman wished for, steady, successful, dependable. He worked as a financial advisor, wore crisp shirts without a wrinkle, and never forgot to wave at the mailman. When he walked through town, people greeted him with the quiet respect given to men who seem in control of their lives. Inside the house, Emma Hale played her part just as flawlessly. She moved with quiet grace, her auburn hair pinned neatly back as she prepared dinner, always dressed as though expecting company. Her laughter during neighborhood gatherings was light and practiced, perfectly synchronized with Daniel's well-timed jokes. To friends, they were harmony embodied, a marriage built on love, mutual respect, and unshakable trust. But there were moments, small, fleeting shadows, that unsettled the perfection. A glance too sharp when Daniel thought no one was watching. A pause in Emma's smile when his hand rested too tightly on her arm. In those cracks something unspoken lingered, something that neither photographs nor polite chatter could capture. Daniel liked to keep routines, dinner at 6 sharp, the evening news at 7, lights out by 10. Emma followed those rhythms, but her eyes sometimes strayed to the clock, as though silently counting down the minutes. She wondered if the neighbors could sense the difference between their public charm and the silence that fell inside these walls once the doors closed. At night, when the world outside settled, Emma often lay awake. Daniel's steady breathing beside her should have comforted her, but it didn't. Instead, she felt the weight of his presence, heavy, pressing, as though the air itself thickened when he turned in bed. She never told anyone about those sleepless hours, nor about the way she sometimes caught herself staring at him, searching his expression for something she couldn't name. To the neighborhood, they were the perfect couple. To themselves, they were actors in a play that never ended, and in the silence between them, seeds of suspicion were already taking root. Tomorrow night, Emma would hear the first whisper that would change everything. Emma hadn't planned on staying awake that night. But after staring at the ceiling through the stillness, she rose, padding softly across the darkened hallway. Downstairs, the hum of the refrigerator seemed too loud. That's when she heard it. A voice, muffled, urgent, coming from Daniel's office. She froze at the bottom step. His tone was low, deliberate, almost unfamiliar. When she leaned closer, only fragments reached her. "Can't. Not now. She'll..." Before silence cut the words short, a drawer slid shut. A chair scraped against the floor. By the time Daniel emerged, phone tucked away, his smile looked practiced, like it had been placed on seconds before she saw him. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. His hand brushed her shoulder, tender enough for anyone watching to believe in his care. But Emma's skin prickled under his touch. The next morning, the strangeness deepened. A receipt fell from Daniel's jacket while she folded laundry, a hotel bill dated 2 nights earlier. He had told her he was working late at the office. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the paper, the inked room charge echoing louder than any confession. She slid it into her apron pocket before he returned. At dinner, she tried to test the waters. "You've been busy lately," she said, keeping her voice casual. Daniel barely looked up from his plate. "Clients," he replied smoothly. "They never rest." Her chest tightened. "At a hotel?" His fork stopped. For the briefest second, his eyes sharpened. Then, as quickly as a shutter clicking open, the expression softened. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Emma, really? You've been watching too many crime shows. That was a client dinner. Business covered the room for the night. You can't take everything so seriously." His tone was calm, reasonable, and yet it sliced deeper than anger. He made it sound absurd that she doubted him at all. By the end of the meal, Emma felt the weight of her own uncertainty pressing down, as though she had conjured the entire thing in her imagination. Still, the phone calls returned. Low whispers behind locked doors, always at the hour when shadows stretched longest. She told herself she might be wrong, that perhaps it was nothing. But late one night, lying awake while Daniel's voice murmured again in the dark, Emma realized the perfect marriage she clung to might already be unraveling. And soon, she would no longer be able to ignore it. By the third night of whispers, Emma could no longer silence her own doubts. The hotel receipt still burned in her apron pocket, the ink smudged from where her fingers had pressed it too often. Tonight she decided she would not let Daniel's explanations wash over her. Tonight she would demand the truth. When he entered the kitchen, loosened tie draped around his neck, she didn't wait for his smile. "Who were you speaking to last night?" Daniel froze only for a moment before placing his briefcase down. "Emma, not this again. I told you it was business." Her voice rose, sharper than she intended. "Business doesn't sound like whispering at 2 in the morning. Business doesn't leave hotel receipts in your jacket." The mask cracked. Daniel's face tightened, his jaw clenched. "Are you spying on me now?" His tone carried no warmth, only accusation. "I'm your wife," she shot back. "I deserve the truth." What followed was not the calm dismissal she expected. His hand slammed against the table, silverware clattering to the floor. The suddenness made her flinch. "Enough!" His voice thundered through the house. "Do you hear yourself? Paranoid, imagining things, turning this home into a courtroom. Do you know how insane you sound?" Her breath quickened. The rage in his eyes was raw, unfiltered, not the polished charm their neighbors adored. She saw in him something dangerous, a man who needed control more than he needed love. Outside, a dog barked. Curtains twitched across the street. The Hales were no strangers to the neighborhood's attention, but tonight the shadows of onlookers lingered longer than usual. Still, by morning, the whispers would be dismissed as just another couple's fight. Emma pressed herself against the counter, refusing to yield. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. "I'm not crazy, Daniel, and one day the truth will come out." His expression shifted, smoothing over like a blade wiped clean. He stepped back, straightened his tie, and forced a smile that looked grotesque under the kitchen light. "Then maybe you should be more careful what truth you think you're ready to hear." Emma didn't sleep that night. The fracture had split wide open, and from the cracks something darker was already seeping in. Tomorrow someone unexpected would appear at her door. The morning after their fight, Emma moved through the house like a ghost. Daniel had left early for work, leaving behind the faint smell of cologne and a silence that clung to the walls. Her eyes lingered on the kitchen table, remembering the echo of his fist against the wood, the fury in his eyes. Something had shifted between them, and she knew it would not return to what it once was. By midday, she decided to clear her head with a walk. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath her shoes. She reached the mailbox, flipping through bills and flyers when a voice cut through the quiet. "Emma?" She turned. A man stood across the street, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn leather jacket. His face carried the weight of years, but recognition came instantly. Matthew Carter. He had once been more than a friend, long before Daniel. They hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Her throat tightened. "Matthew?" He crossed over, his steps hesitant yet determined. "I didn't know you lived here. I wasn't sure if I should stop, but when I saw you..." He broke off, eyes flicking toward the house behind her. Emma forced a polite smile, though unease prickled her skin. "It's been a long time." Matthew studied her carefully. "Yeah, too long. Look, I don't mean to stir anything up, but I know about Daniel." The words sliced through her composure. "What are you talking about?" He lowered his voice, glancing around as if the neighborhood itself might be listening. "He isn't who you think he is. Back in Boston, before you two married, there were rumors, things that didn't add up. People disappeared, Emma, people connected to him." Her pulse quickened. "That's ridiculous." "You don't know him." Matthew's eyes softened with pity. "I knew enough to keep my distance. Just be careful. I'm saying this because I still care what happens to you." Emma's breath caught, torn between disbelief and dread. She wanted to dismiss him, to laugh off his warning as bitterness from the past. Yet the memory of Daniel's rage, the whispers at night, the hotel receipt, they all echoed louder now. She forced the conversation to end, excusing herself with shaky politeness. As she stepped back inside, she pressed her back against the door, heart racing. If Matthew was right, then the blood on Daniel's hands wasn't just metaphorical, and soon she would see proof. The conversation with Matthew had left Emma raw, her nerves fraying with each passing hour. She tried to shake his warning, but Daniel's presence only sharpened the unease. His smiles seemed rehearsed, his reassurances more like scripts than truths. And then came the night that left no space for denial. It was past midnight, when Emma woke to a faint sound, a creak, the metallic groan of hinges somewhere below. She sat up, straining her ears. Daniel wasn't beside her. The clock glowed 12:47 a.m. She rose quietly, her bare feet pressing against the cold floorboards, and followed the noise. The basement door, usually shut tight, stood slightly ajar. A dim light flickered beneath. She hesitated, heart hammering, before pressing the door open and descending the steps. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, the sharp scent of bleach mingled with something metallic. Her eyes adjusted to the weak bulb swinging above, casting uneven shadows across shelves stacked with tools and boxes. Then she saw it. A trunk tucked behind the workbench, its lid half closed. Something crimson peeked through the gap. Emma's breath caught as she edged closer. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid. Inside, clothes lay crumpled and soaked dark, stiff with dried blood. Not just one shirt, but several. A scarf she didn't recognize. A jacket torn at the sleeve. She staggered back, her throat closing, a cry threatening to escape. The sound of a step behind her froze her in place. Daniel stood at the foot of the stairs, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He didn't rush forward or shout. Instead, he walked calmly, his eyes fixed on her as though she were a child caught stealing sweets. "It's not what it looks like," he said evenly, voice low but steady. Emma shook her head, words stuck in her throat. She could only point to the trunk, the blood that stained her vision. He sighed, closing the lid with deliberate slowness. "You shouldn't have come down here, Emma. Curiosity. It's dangerous." Her body tensed, ready to run, but his tone carried no immediate threat. That made it worse. Calmness in the face of horror was its own kind of menace. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel leaned against the workbench, arms folding with an almost casual ease. "A mess, one I've been trying to clean up. And now you've made it harder." His composure chilled her more than anger ever could. He didn't plead, didn't panic. He acted as though the discovery was inevitable, as though he had expected this moment all along. Emma backed toward the stairs, her mind racing, but Daniel's gaze followed. Steady and unblinking, above them the house creaked, as if the walls themselves strained under the weight of the secret now laid bare. And before dawn, he would tell her just enough to keep her tethered. Emma didn't remember walking back upstairs. She only remembered the way Daniel's eyes followed her from the basement, calm and steady, as though he already owned her silence. When she finally stopped pacing the bedroom, she realized the lights had gone out. The house was swallowed in sudden darkness. "Power's out." Daniel's voice drifted from downstairs, unshaken. "Stay where you are." But she couldn't. She followed the faint glow of candlelight to the dining room, where Daniel sat at the table with a single flame flickering between them. He gestured for her to sit, his face soft with shadows, half concealed, half revealed. "You saw things you weren't supposed to," he said quietly, almost tenderly. "And now, you deserve the truth." Emma lowered herself into the chair, hands trembling against her lap. Her heart begged her to run, but some deeper part of her, the part that needed to know, kept her still. Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm, deliberate. "I've done things. Things people would never understand. The clothes you saw? They belonged to men who hurt others. I stopped them. That's all. I wasn't killing for pleasure, Emma. I was delivering justice where the system failed." Her breath caught. "Justice?" "Daniel, there was blood. People are dead." He nodded slowly as though acknowledging the obvious. "Yes, and they would have kept hurting innocent people if someone hadn't intervened. The world is full of predators. I only evened the scales." His words wrapped around her like smoke, suffocating yet strangely hypnotic. She wanted to scream, to call him a liar, but another part of her recognized the conviction in his eyes. He wasn't confessing sins. He was defending a philosophy. Emma whispered, "And what about me? Would you hurt me too if I crossed you?" Daniel's gaze softened. "Never you. You're the reason I can do what I do. You're the one thing I protect above all else. Everything I've done, Emma, it was for us. For a terrifying moment, she almost believed him. The flicker of the candlelight blurred the edges of her fear, twisting it into something dangerously close to fascination. Yet as she sat there, Daniel's words echoing in the dark, she realized the walls around her weren't just walls. They were bars. She was no longer a wife. She was a witness, a prisoner of his secrets. And the more he spoke, the more she understood. Escape would not come easily. Emma woke with the heaviness of candlelight still lingering in her mind, the echo of Daniel's justice ringing in her ears. She thought of packing a bag, of leaving before dawn. But when she stepped into the hallway, her suitcase was gone. The closet, usually stacked with her old luggage, stood empty. Downstairs, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming in front of him. He didn't look up as he spoke. "You won't find them. I had them moved. For safekeeping." Emma's chest tightened. "You planned this." He finally raised his eyes, calm, almost tender. "I planned for us. You think I don't know the thoughts racing in your head? Running, leaving, betraying. But Emma, where would you go? Who would believe you? They'd call you hysterical, paranoid. I've built trust in this town. You'd be the liar." Her knees weakened, but she stood tall. "You can't keep me here forever." Daniel leaned back, sipping his coffee slowly. "I don't have to. You'll stay because you know I've only ever protected us. Every decision I made, every life I ended, was to keep you safe. You are my anchor, Emma. Without you, I'd have no reason at all." His words coiled around her, half plea, half threat. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was a monster. But the way his gaze lingered, steady, unblinking, reminded her of the trunk in the basement, the blood, the finality of what he was capable of. She picked up the phone later that day, fingers trembling as she dialed. But before the line connected, Daniel's hand gently pressed over hers. He didn't yank the phone away or shout. He just smiled. "You don't need anyone else, Emma. Friends, family. They never understood you the way I do. We don't need their noise. We're enough, you and I." Her throat closed. He was isolating her, brick by brick, wall by wall. And the terrifying part was how calm he made it sound. Like devotion, not imprisonment. By evening, the house was silent again. Emma stared at her reflection in the darkened window, wondering how long before someone outside would notice the cracks. The knock that finally came wasn't hers to expect. The knock at the door came just as dusk settled over the neighborhood. Emma froze, her hands still damp from washing dishes. Daniel, seated in the living room with a newspaper, didn't move at first. The knock came again, steady, deliberate. "I'll get it," Daniel finally said, folding the paper with slow precision. But before he reached the handle, Emma's voice broke in. "I'll answer." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe instinct, maybe desperation. When she opened the door, a man stood there in a plain suit, his badge glinting faintly beneath the porch light. Detective Harris. His eyes were sharp, his smile faint but professional. "Mrs. Hale, sorry to disturb you. May I ask you a few questions?" Emma's pulse quickened. Daniel appeared behind her, his presence looming. "What's this about?" he asked smoothly. The detective's gaze flicked between them. "It concerns a few recent disappearances. People in town mentioned your husband's name. Purely routine, of course." Emma's grip tightened on the doorframe. Daniel's laugh was practiced, warm enough to disarm a stranger. "Disappearing people? Detective, surely you don't think I'd have anything to do with something so absurd." But Harris wasn't swayed. He asked about Daniel's late nights, his trips, his clients. Each question was a needle pricking at Emma's silence. She wanted to scream the truth, about the trunk, the blood, the midnight whispers. But Daniel's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent warning disguised as affection. "She worries too much," Daniel told the detective. "Always has." "Don't you, Emma?" His voice was honey, but his grip burned. Emma forced a nod. "Yes, I worry." The detective's eyes lingered on her, searching as though he sensed the words she wasn't saying. He handed her a card before leaving. "If anything comes to mind, Mrs. Hale, day or night, call me." When the door closed, Daniel's smile vanished. He slipped the card from her hand, tucking it into his pocket. "We don't need outsiders in our marriage, Emma. Don't forget that." Her chest tightened. The choice had become unbearable. Remain silent and complicit, or risk everything to break free. That night she lay awake, replaying the detective's face, his steady gaze. The card was gone, but the possibility it offered still pulsed in her mind, and soon desperation would push her to act. Emma waited until Daniel left for his late meeting before she acted. Her hands shook as she pulled the phone from its hiding place beneath the sofa cushion. The detective's card was gone. Daniel had made sure of that, but Emma had memorized the number. She whispered it into the receiver, her voice trembling. "Detective Harris? It's me, Emma Hale. I don't have long." "You were right." A sound behind her made her spin. The front door had opened. Daniel stood there, his expression unreadable, his eyes colder than she'd ever seen. "Who are you talking to?" His voice was low, steady, but the edge of danger hummed beneath it. Emma's breath caught. She dropped the phone. Harris's muffled voice still echoed from the receiver. "Mrs. Hale, hello?" Daniel stepped forward, picking up the handset with deliberate calm. He pressed the button, cutting the line, then set the phone gently on the table. The silence stretched. "You called him," he said, almost like a father chastising a child. "After everything I told you. After everything I did for us." Emma backed away, her pulse hammering. "You killed people, Daniel. You've lied to me, trapped me." His mask shattered. Rage twisted his face. "I saved you. I gave you a life where no one could hurt you. And this is how you repay me." The argument ignited into violence. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward him. She fought back, clawing, shoving, desperate to escape. In the struggle, a candle toppled from the mantel, flames licking the rug before either of them noticed. Emma wrenched free, gasping for air, but the fire spread quickly, curtains catching, wood cracking under the sudden blaze. Daniel turned, his fury momentarily replaced by shock. "You did this," he spat, though it was his grip that had tipped the flame. Smoke thickened, filling the room. Emma stumbled toward the door, coughing, her eyes stinging. Behind her, Daniel grabbed at her again, but she shoved him hard into the wall. The fire roared louder, swallowing the living room. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone had called for help. Maybe a neighbor, maybe Harris himself. Emma reached the threshold, heat searing her back. She turned once, just once, and saw Daniel silhouetted in the inferno, his face illuminated with something between hatred and heartbreak. "Emma!" he shouted, his voice lost in the crackle of flames. She fled into the night, collapsing on the grass as fire consumed the home that had once been their stage for perfection. Neighbors gathered, watching in horror as the Hale house burned. Emma's tears mixed with smoke on her cheeks. She had destroyed the lie. But the truth was still inside, burning with him. And in the ashes, there would be no turning back. The fire devoured the Hale house until nothing but a blackened skeleton remained. Emma sat wrapped in a blanket on the curb, paramedics hovering near her, though she barely heard their questions. Her gaze stayed fixed on the flames, watching the only life she had ever known collapse into smoke and embers. Through the chaos, police sirens cut sharp against the night. Officers rushed forward, dragging Daniel from the burning wreckage. His clothes were scorched, his face streaked with soot, but his eyes, wild, frantic, burned brighter than the fire behind him. "Emma," he shouted, struggling against the officer's grip. "Don't let them take me. Tell them the truth." Emma turned her face away, unable to meet his gaze. For the first time, the mask of composure he had worn for years had cracked completely. What stared back at her wasn't the charming husband the neighbors adored, but a man consumed by his own delusion. At the station, Detective Harris led the interrogation. Emma was asked to give her statement. She spoke haltingly, her voice breaking as she described the whispers, the basement, the trunk of blood-stained clothes. Each word felt like betrayal, yet also release. Behind the glass, she watched Daniel in the interrogation room. His hands were cuffed, but his confidence hadn't left him. He spoke with conviction, explaining to Harris that the men he'd killed deserved it, that he was only doing what the law failed to do. His tone was rational, calm, disturbingly persuasive. "He doesn't see himself as guilty," Harris murmured. "He sees himself as necessary." Emma hugged herself, trembling. She knew that tone too well. The same voice that once convinced her to stay, to doubt herself, to believe love could excuse everything. Days blurred together. Reporters swarmed the street calling her name. Headlines painted Daniel as both a monster and a mastermind. Neighbors whispered, their perfect couple shattered before their eyes. When the trial began, Emma sat in the courtroom feeling the weight of every stare. Daniel's eyes found hers, unwavering as though their marriage still bound her to him even across the divide of law and crime. And yet, when the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, Emma didn't feel triumph. Relief, yes, but alongside it, grief twisted in her chest, sharp and unyielding. She had loved him once, truly, deeply. She had built her life around him. And now all that remained was ash. The documentary lens closed in on her weary face, her voice breaking in the final confession. I loved a monster. Sometimes, I wonder if part of that monster lives in me because I stayed, because I let myself believe him, because even now, I still miss the man I thought he was. The screen faded to black,